JP, what's your sense of what this Mariners offense really is? Because we've seen two extremes. We've seen April, and then we just saw May, and now the carryover into June. What do you think this Mariners offense could be?
It's interesting, Mike. I looked this up earlier today in anticipation of this conversation and this exact question. And I said, what is this team? And so I looked at the numbers. Interestingly, the Mariners this year have scored 1 run more than the mean runs scored of all teams in Major League Baseball. They are about as average as any team could possibly get in terms of the offensive output, which might be a little bit reassuring. I say this with a question mark to Mariner fans, because they're saying, "Oh my gosh, we're average. This is average. That means there's half the teams are worse than us." Which I'm here to say is yes, that's exactly what a mean means. In fact, or more or less, median mean. We can get into those.
Right.
I'm not going to relitigate, Algebra 1. But what we can say is that is the result of a pretty good April and a pretty poor May and early days of June. They need to be better than what they were against Baltimore. And yet, if you were to ask me what I think their biggest priority probably needs to be at the deadline, I would still actually answer a starting pitcher, because there's been significant attrition to this point on the rotation, and I'm just a little bit worried about what the rest of the year looks like for the rotation, given what we've already seen. And getting Miller back is great, but I would say that you need to address pitching first, and then do you hope that some combination of your different internal options get better, that Cole Young becomes a more productive player? Williamson probably is not ready to be the everyday third baseman on a division-winning team, if we're being honest right now. They have some areas where they can upgrade. Now, then the good news is that the spots that they hypothetically would need to upgrade are generally easier to handle in season. First base, you could say, maybe even DH, third base, arguably, a corner outfield spot. I mean, there's multiple spots where they could probably improve. The issue is right now that, and I was looking at this pretty thoroughly earlier today, there's not a ton out there right now. There are a handful of teams that are, I think, willing to move or will eventually be willing to move. But oddly enough, even the Orioles haven't quite signaled to the whole world yet that they're ready to move O'Hearn and Mullins. So the supply is short. I think the Mariners have to acknowledge that probably for the next month or so, they're going to have to get by with what they've got and hope there are some internal improvements. But I would say they should be scouting the starting pitching at least as thoroughly as they are the position players, because I look at this picture, and Kirby and Gilbert have both missed enough time that I'm worried more about pitching than anything else.
Hey, JP, we were looking at some of the numbers that have gone down offensively, and there was 3 that stood out to me that didn't go down, and it's all because of one guy. Slug, OPS, and home runs, and Cal he's just been amazing what he's doing. He was responsible for all 3 RBIs yesterday. Any problem with him? And he said, look, he would love to be in the Home Run Derby, and the same thing with the World Baseball Classic. So any problems there? I mean, I guess the WBC would be, a little bit more, certainly more taxing on him that I would think, other than the Home Run Derby. But there has been some guys that complained about the Home Run Derby, how it affected their swing or something. There was somebody a few years ago, I can't remember, but it just, to me, I mean, he should absolutely do the Home Run Derby. I'm not so sure about the WBC, but what do you think?
I would love both. I think both events are wonderful, and there have been players that you look back and, whether it's Vladimir Guerrero Jr., other guys that have shined in that event that have actually been a good platform for them to achieve even more. Soto obviously has had some good home run derbies as well. So I think that in general, I'm a supporter of the Derby. I understand that there are some that don't love it. But I would also point out, with respect to Cal, you've got the option of being a switch hitter. And Rutschman, of course, had a nice run at his a couple of years ago in Seattle. And, again, I think what's happened to Adley is not because of the Home Run Derby in terms of his numbers dipping. But I think that it's a great experience. I think a lot of players have benefited from it tremendously. There's also a financial component to it that's real. Obviously, he's got a nice deal now, and it's not so much a concern probably in that world. But the WBC, I love it, and I think especially there are a lot of players who have spent a long time in the major leagues, and even some that have won World Series and been to the World Series before, who when they retire say that the WBC was their favorite thing that they did, that it meant the most. You're playing for your country. You're playing with the best of the players from your country. I think Cal Raleigh, and again, I can't speak for Mark DeRosa, who's the manager. He's my teammate at the network, but I don't have a spot on the masthead of Team USA. I can text D-Rose suggestions here and there. I don't think he needs me to suggest anything about catcher. I think he knows who the best catcher, at least among the American-born guys, have been. I guess you could say a tandem between Will Smith and Cal. It's hard to argue that's. I mean, to me, those are the two guys. I love Real Muto as well, but I just think that right now Cal and Will have kind of separated themselves among everybody else. It's just a great experience, and it to me, especially for position players. Now, pitchers, I understand that there are certain teams that are always a little bit wary of their pitchers participating, especially if they go all the way through October. As much as I love the WBC, if someone's pitching Game 7 of the World Series, by just out of general practice, if they say, listen, I'm going to Game 7 of the World Series, I'm pitching on Halloween, I'm probably not the best option to pitch again in a meaningful game on March 7th. I would agree with that. That's probably true. But for position players, they're ready. And they're already in, maybe he would have to catch one or two more innings on his early starts in Peoria in spring to make sure he's ready to go. But spring training starts earlier. I've never heard a position player feeling like the WBC wore them out too much, especially for the guys that get to stay in North America. I mean, the tournament, he would go Arizona spring training, Houston, and then Miami, and then you go back to Peoria. And basically, there have been a great many players who, when the WBC is done, and it's this amazing emotional experience, and you either win it or you lose it, and you're there in the final game, and there's confetti everywhere, and they've crowned a world champion, and you look at your watch, and it says March 21st, and you're like, do I really have to go back to spring training for 10 more days after this? This is like the apex of my year. And I was, you got a B game on the backfields against the Royals AAA team in Surprise. You're like, oh, no. That's so, believe me, the guys that are in it, they love it, and they are not wishing that they're back at spring training when they're playing it.
JP, getting back to what you mentioned about starting pitching for the Mariners, what type of starter are you talking about here? Not a big name, obviously, right? Because it seems like their big prospects and their big trade deadline move might have to be for a bat. But are you talking about a guy like a Tyler Anderson, like they brought in 2021, or someone that you think would be here for multiple years that they would get at the deadline? I think optimally, just based on the price tag, you're probably looking at more of that rental type, someone who's on an expiring contract. One name and one team that I'll mention that probably hasn't. Actually, I'll mention two of them. Two Zacks. Zach Littell of the Rays. The Rays are almost always up for moving a pending free agent. Savali comes to mind. They did that a couple years ago. So Zach Littell of Tampa, and then Zach Gallen of Arizona. Now, the Gallen is a little bit more on like peering around the corner and down the street to say what will happen once now Corbin Burns is out for the season and what is the ramifications of that on the rest of the club. The Diamondbacks are in a tough spot now. They've got a lot of money that's being paid to guys that are hurt or not pitching well, and Gallen's now going to be a free agent after the season is over. And so they're in a bit of a quandary here, because either you try to put the accelerator down and make it to the playoffs, or you basically say, you know what, you're in the same division as the Dodgers, Padres, and the Giants. It's probably not your year, if we're just being honest. And so I think that trading Gallen is probably the right call, unless they're going to keep spending. But see, now they're in a really difficult situation. Montgomery was a disaster to this point. Burns is hurt. They need to fill out next year's rotation with existing personnel, unless they're going to go out and spend more. And I'm just not sure that they have the appetite to spend more at this point. So I think, if anything, the Burns news makes a Gallen trade more likely, because they need to, in my opinion, recoup some prospects. And we know this, D-backs and Mariners trade a lot. Mariners and Rays
trade a lot.
Yeah.
So whether it's Littell with Tampa or Gallen with the D-backs, Mike, we'll clip this one off on June the 6th. If there's a deal between these teams on July 31, we'll come back to it. If there's not, we'll lose the tape and forget about it forever.
I like that style. There we go. Yeah.
Hey, real quick, JP, you mentioned it, that they tend to trade with the Diamondbacks and the Rays. Is that just the relationship, basically, between management, or why is that?
Yeah, I think so. Those front offices have known each other for a long time. I think that helps on some level. They also seem just to evaluate players similarly. Obviously, we know in baseball you tend to not trade in the same division all that often. It happens, but it's rarer. And I think that so trading out of the division is usually good.
Right.
And then you want to deal with teams that you seem to value players similarly and have good relationships and good trust. And certainly Jerry has a background with the D-backs from a long time ago where he was there and knows the organization there very well. So I think that from that standpoint, there's a comfort level that I think would help. It just seems like Jerry and Justin deal well with Arizona, and that group is very, I think, open and collaborative. Mike Hazen, Amiel Sade, really good. Of course, in Tampa, Eric Neander, and he's got a great staff there in general. John Daniels is now helping them out a little bit too in that front office. So I think in general, it's just a bunch of really professional guys that have known each other for a very, very long time. And it's interesting this time of year. You go back and look at teams that trade with each other, and Seattle, Tampa, Seattle, Arizona is a frequent matchup. There are those that don't trade that often. Like, I don't think they've done. I was trying to think off the top of my head. Dustin Ackley wound up with the Yankees, but that hasn't often been a matchup, of course. Although Jesus Montero, Michael Pineda. I'm just like going back off the top of my head. You don't see many deals, it seems, with certain particular organizations, but Tampa and Arizona, they do.